I went to motocross on Good Friday and woke up a month later.
The fact of waking up a month later, you must be like, what the hell happened?
An Aston Martin V8 Vantage. The noise it made was something special as well. My parents did some research into quad bikes and found that when they flip over, they can be quite dangerous.
The fact of giving a young kid a motorised vehicle, what goes through parents' heads going, good idea.
What you've just said there is you'd like supercar days to be offered supercar driving experience just for you.
Yeah, basically. I'm happy to be the guinea pig. Why do you need to go to the gym to race a car? You're literally sitting down. But I sit down and go, I'd love like all these different cars, but I know I can't get a wheelchair in them. So I'm like,
The air temperature at Brands Hatch this weekend was in the mid-30s, and inside the car it was over 50 degrees.
Oh, imagine that. It just said to someone, right, go run around the sauna for an hour and let me know how you feel.
I don't think they'll be feeling great.
No. Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Aaron with us. Aaron, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Aaron Morgan. I'm currently 34 years old and I live in Basingstoke and near the south coast. I am a racing driver with a disability following a motocross accident when I was just 15 years of age, which has left me a permanent wheelchair user, and I drive with Team Brit.
Awesome. I'm buzzing for this conversation, more so because it feeds into my own interest, but I can't wait to hear sort of some more of your story. So to start us off, can you give us a brief introduction to sort of like how you got into racing and a bit more about your racing journey?
Of course. So when I was younger, quite unexpectedly, my granddad wanted to buy me a quad bike for Christmas, just for me to hack around on. But my parents did some research into quad bikes and found that when they flip over, they can be quite dangerous. So they talked him out of getting me a quad bike and got me a 50cc motocross bike for Christmas. What was that, 1997? Now, I initially just rode it around local fields, just getting used to it, how the bike worked, getting used to the controls. But then after a while, I said to my dad, right, Dad, can you build me a track? Because I'm fed up of just going around in circles. This is quite boring. And then after a bit longer of practicing the tracks, Dad used to just poke sticks in the ground and say, right, so I'm going to go to the left of this one, the right of that one, etc., etc. I think I got it wrong loads of times. I'd go the wrong way around his little track. I'm sure it drove him wild. But after practicing the little tracks he made me for a little bit, the next question then became, Dad, right, I want someone to race against now. I'm bored of just riding around by myself. I want someone to race against now. And it was early in 1998 that we found a local motocross club and went to a local race meeting.
Amazing. So that's sort of where it all started, was literally your granddad going, do you know what? Just get him on a bike. I find it crazy because I don't come from a race family. I've got cousins that do it, similar to yourself, got very into motocross. And the fact of giving a young kid a motorised vehicle, even to this day, I think, what goes through parents' heads going, good idea. But I've met so many people that absolutely love the sport and they love, and to be honest, it probably teaches kids to be a lot safer than probably I would have been, to be fair.
Definitely, yeah. It definitely teaches you to be safe, and it's like anything, you always. I don't know if I've ever met someone across my 8 years of racing that immediately just jumped on a bike and was immediately flat out. You all start slow and work your way up at your own pace. It's similar to driving on the road. You'll be very cautious at first, and slowly as confidence and your experience level goes up, the speed will increase too.
Definitely. And I think as well, it's that whole thing of, if you grow up with it, you don't know any different. So you just go, yeah, this is what I do. This is my day to day. I do just jump on my bike. I just find, I'm not as much of a petrol head. I just find the concept of letting kids loose with machines like that absolutely crazy. But it's really nice to see that it's sort of, you can see it's a huge passion of yours. So I just wanted to then come on to obviously your accident that happened to you, if I'm right, around about 15, that you had your accident doing the sport that you loved.
Yes. So it was on Good Friday 2006. Me and my dad went to a local track to us just to practice for the day. Track I'd done hundreds of laps on, and was one of my favourites as well, actually. A very jumpy track, and it was, one day on this Good Friday, one of the jumps on the track just caught me out. I'd love to tell you more about the accident, what happened, but I don't know. When immediately after the crash, I stopped breathing for 9 minutes, so I'm incredibly lucky to still be alive. And following that, I was in a coma for 4 weeks as well. So I don't.
Wow.
I went to motocross on Good Friday and woke up a month later.
That must be quite a mind bending experience. More so, I'm taking out the injury and everything else. Just the fact of waking up a month later, you must be like, what the hell happened?
Well, at first you don't know the amount of time that's passed, and it was a very confusing time for me being so young. The first thing that I remember, I was in the side room in Southampton Hospital, and I woke up one morning and I was so confused why everything had changed. Really, why I was no longer able to get out of bed independently, etc., etc.
Yeah,
and the Asian cleaning lady came in, and I just begged her to help me in some way because I had no idea what was going on. Now, my mum kept like a photo diary of my whole hospital stay, and there's quite clearly pictures where I'm awake and I'm there, but I do not remember them being taken. So there was a time when the surgeon who operated on my spine told me, obviously, the diagnosis of my injury and being paralyzed from the waist down, and my mum said that I turn my head away and sort of cover my eyes with my hands, but like I don't remember that at all.
And then I suppose as well, it's just the body trying to repair itself and trying to adapt. I mean, I say all this like because obviously for those who know my history, they know that happened to me, but I was only 4 weeks old, so I literally have no clue it happened. I don't know any different. So you were 15 at the time, practically a young adult. Yeah, it must have been such a tough experience. How long was the recovery?
No, I spent most of 2006 in hospital. So the accident happened on April 14th.
Yeah.
And I then left hospital the following January. It was a very long process, but there were a number of stages I had to go through in terms of sort of physio and occupational therapy to build up the strength I needed to be able to live in a wheelchair, to be able to do the relevant transfers I need to do, whether that be getting into bed, getting into the car. They're the main two. The other one onto the sofa.
Yeah.
As well as the medical things that were going on, because obviously a number of the functions of my body are now have to be done in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine, what was the impact of that on like if you don't mind speaking on it, your mental health, of how it impacted the way you feel, how you're feeling? Because I can imagine, I always say whenever I go, stuff like I'm in a very, people don't see it, but I'm in a very ideal situation of I don't know any different. So people go, it must suck to be in a wheelchair. And I'm like, I don't know. I grew up like it. So like it's the way I get around. I don't see it like that. But obviously for you, someone like yourself who has an accident that means that the way they live completely changes, I can imagine it has a huge, huge impact.
It definitely had a huge impact at first. I vividly remember lying in hospital bed in the early days, just going through the numbers and the stats, thinking, working out what the chances of an injury that happened to me actually happening, and going through, ultimately, there are so many races a race weekend, there are this many riders on the gate, they do this many laps in a race, they do this many jumps in a lap, and
Yeah.
You're just overwhelming yourself with numbers, thinking, what, why me, why me, why me? But as I mentioned before, when my parents told me that I actually stopped breathing for 9 minutes, the script completely flipped.
Yeah.
And upon learning how lucky I was to still be alive, in my head it became a question of when something bad happens, but something even worse could have happened. So you just have to be really grateful that the worst thing didn't happen and accept the bad thing. So for me, I realized how lucky I was to still be alive,
Yeah.
and that just being in a wheelchair was something I have to embrace. And it was at that point I made a promise to myself that I'd never let my disability hold me back from anything.
So really, it's also the whole thing of adapting that completely different way of thinking, and it's great to hear that you kind of took the approach of, look, it is a bad thing that happened, but it could have been a lot worse. What was the journey like with going back to college or school, or what after your injury?
I was very lucky in some ways, if you'd like to call it that. I was very academic as a child, a bit of a goody two shoes. I don't mind admitting that. And so I was just about to sit my GCSEs, and I took my mock GCSE tests very seriously.
Yeah.
And I managed to achieve really good grades in them. So when I had my accident on Good Friday, and then obviously, so I was then in my coma for when all my friends were taking their exams and stuff. So I was unable to sit them, but luckily my school was able to apply to the relevant exam boards, and I was put through my GCSEs based on my mock results.
Wow.
So I was pretty lucky in terms of that. But then when my friends went to college, started going to college, was obviously when I was meant to sort of enroll, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But I was still in hospital, so I started, being the academic person, as I mentioned, I started my college work when I was in hospital. Still, it was a much reduced level of work that I was doing, but I started it there and fitted that in and around the physio and the other medical commitments that I had when I was in hospital. So the transition wasn't too difficult because school and education had always meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was difficult because, I didn't have any direct teaching. It was all me reading, being sent stuff to read and activities to do. So, but then once I'd left hospital, like I say, in January 2007, I very quickly returned back to college full time.
Amazing. And as well, like, you've got to be a certain type of person to take that on board in terms of, I'm thinking back to when I was 15. And if you said to me, right, this major things happened in my life. Now, also, what you've also got to consider is now focusing on your schoolwork. I don't, being brutally honest, I don't think I could have done it. I probably would have been like, hang on, one problem at a time, mum, chill out. Like, it's a credit to you to say that you kind of just cracked on. I mean, I'd say most 15-year-olds would be like, sod that, like, let me deal with this problem first.
No, thank you, mate. But I mean, I'm sure, my physio and my other stuff when I was in hospital, it wasn't like a 9 to 5 job. It was about an hour a day. So outside of that, what else was there to do? Hospitals. I'm sure they won't mind me saying they're quite boring places. And I'm not one just to sit there for hours on end watching TV either. I need to be active. I need to be doing stuff. So that played a big part in it as well.
Hence the wanting to travel hundreds of miles an hour.
Exactly.
I want to come on to, because my brain goes, right, I've just had a major accident that was caused by motorsport. What was the journey like when you started venturing into getting back into motorsport? Because I would have thought it was quite traumatic of like, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. I don't want to go anywhere near that with a 10-foot barge pole. So what was the journey like getting back into motorsport?
No, it was quite a long one. So I didn't mention before that when I was growing up, sort of the first 7 years of my life, my dad was a very keen go-kart racer.
Mm.
And when he had through go-karting, he had a really good friend who raced rallycross as well. So when I wasn't watching my dad go-karting, we were regularly at Dover racetrack. Sorry, Liddon Hill racetrack, which is down near Dover, watching John race. So where I grew up around motorsport, and then obviously started motocrossing myself, etc. And then when I was in hospital, my occupational therapist came to me one day and said, "Aaron, are you aware that disabled people can learn to drive at 16 years of age?" And as someone who'd been around go-karting, motor cars and motorbikes, etc., all their lives, around a dad who was very into cars, etc., that to me was absolute music to my ears. And I actually started learning to drive from the hospital. So my driving instructor would come to the hospital. I'd wheel myself out, get in the car. The nurse would take my wheelchair back into the ward.
That.
I'd go away, do my hour lesson, come back. Obviously, my wheelchair would be back brought out to me, and then I'd go back to just being a regular hospital inpatient. So it was, as I mentioned before, hospitals are quite boring places, and it's like, I need something to do this weekend. And I said to my dad, Dad, have you spoken to John recently, the friend who raced rallycross?
Mm.
I said, let's find out what he's up to, and let's see if we can go watch him race, this weekend or next weekend, just for something to do, really.
Yeah.
And he was a bit hesitant at first, but like all annoying kids, I pushed him, and eventually did. Turns out they got on like a house on fire again, and John invited us along to Brands Hatch. It was the following or 2 weekends after they spoke, and it was when I was there. He told us he'd always owned a business in Bracknell that built and maintained race cars, and he said when we were there, he had two branches now. One in Bracknell and one in Southampton as well, and they were looking to merge them, funny enough, into Basingstoke. So their workshop now is about 10 minutes from where I live.
Handy.
And he said, as publicity for the merge, they'd love to build me a car and get me back into racing. Now, as you said before, at first I was a bit taken aback by it, thinking this, the sport which I knew, loved, raced every weekend, has taken the use of half of my body away from me. But then upon further reflection, motorbikes are a hell of a lot more dangerous than cars are. The safety standards in cars in motor racing these days are incredibly high in terms of roll cages, in terms of fire, the fireproof race suits, the helmets, and all the other bits and bobs that we wear. So after doing a bit of sort of initial thinking about it and getting over the fears, absolutely jumped at the chance. Thought I'd won the lottery, really, to get back into the sport which I knew and I loved. I did start playing wheelchair tennis initially, but quite quickly realised that when I tried to play against my able-bodied friends, it became very difficult. So I really lusted for something that would let me compete on a level playing field with able-bodied people, and that's something motorsport enables me to do.
I've never even thought about that side of it. That's a very valid point of, like, obviously you've got a lot of para sport, but a lot of it means you're competing against other people with disabilities. With a race car's a race car. It's how good are you at driving the race car?
Exactly.
That's a really good point. I never even thought about it like that. That's, slightly mind blown. Like, I've never thought about the fact that you can just, it's a very even playing field. It doesn't matter whether you can use your feet or not. It's how good you are at controlling the car. Although I would caveat that obviously I don't race cars, but obviously driving with hand controls myself. Driving with hand controls, I imagine, is far harder than driving with your feet because you've got a lot less space to work with. Have you ever had that debate with your friends?
No, but like you said before, because you've grown up with a disability, it's all you've ever known. Because I learned to drive with my hands.
Yeah.
It's normal to me, and Team Brit have developed some world-leading hand control technology, which means that, very different to the controls which you probably use in your car, when I'm in the race car, I have two hands on the steering wheel all the time, and I'm able to control the throttle, the brake, and sort of gear up, gear down, or just without changing my hands, moving my hands. So the controls, they really are amazing.
I remember when I spoke to Chris about it, he explained it a little bit as well. It's one of the, I even said it to Chris, it's one of those things that I really want to try, because I'm like, how do you two hands on the steering wheel with hand controls? Because I always think I suppose in a race car, it's very minimal. I would imagine it's very minimal movements. You're not doing big movements as you maybe would in a standard car. So I suppose that plays into it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So the way we take the corners means that you always have your hands at quarter to three, or the quarter to three position, and your arms never need to cross over.
What about obviously we've spoken really briefly that they've brought in sort of an adapted version of hand controls to better suit racing. How is your car adapted to you?
There's no difference in the car other than the fact that it has hand controls, rather to obviously use the accelerator, brake, gear up, gear down, other than just being a normal race car. So for those that you don't know or have never seen them, the Team Brit hand controls work. So the gear up paddle, is in most a lot of road cars these days, that is a progressive throttle. So it's not a button. It's like it's progressive. The closer you pull it to the steering wheel, the more throttle you get. On the left hand side is a progressive brake that works in the same way. The closer to the steering wheel it gets, the more brake that you're applying. And then the gear changing buttons are inside the steering wheel. So you use the throttle and brake with your fingers, and then the gear up and gear down buttons with your thumbs. So for me, the technique that I use is when I'm on full throttle with my right hand as such, I change up gears with my left thumb. And then when I brake with my left hand, I change down gears with my right thumb. It just means that I'm not trying to do too many things with the same hand at the same time.
Yeah. Also, I suppose your hands, also the size of your hands play into that. I'm just thinking, actually, if you've got small hands, you're trying to do three things with one hand. That I would imagine that's quite challenging.
Yeah, the controls are adjustable as well in terms of distance and length. There are a number of things, and that's great. And the awesome thing about the crew within Team Brit, I've been with them now since 2020. I raced with that was my first season with them, and not once through the years we introduce a large number of disabled people into motor racing, all using the same hand controls. And I've never seen the mechanics see like a new disability to them. Yeah. They've never seen one and go, oh no, we can't help that person. It's always right. Okay, this is the problem. How in a technical way, how can we get around it? Which is just one of the things that I love about being part of the team.
I think that's the bit where I go, that's what approach we need to take in wider life. Because the amount of times when I think of disability products and stuff like that, they're just not, it's very much a one size fits all thing. It's, I can completely see why it's so good to be surrounded by a team that's just like, okay, we got a problem. How are we going to fix it? Rather than we can't fix it.
No, definitely.
One thing I did want to ask, and this one's a little bit left field, but I never actually asked when we had Chris on, I never actually asked it. How, obviously, a lot of the time, people with disabilities, they get caught up in the health and safety side of things. How is that managed when you've got a disability? Because I see it even when you go to theme parks, they don't want to go anywhere near you because they're like, if the ride stops, you're stuck. So how does that work in terms of racing from a health and safety point of view?
So in order to be able to race, we have to do a second driving, or we have to get a second license as such, which is called an ARDS license. Now, there's two parts to that. There's a theory part and a practical part. But then once that's passed, I was told to go to the Motorsport UK medical panel, just to give them, detailed medical records, which is obviously what I expected before going through the process. Following that, they then said to me that I need to prove that I can evacuate the race car in under 7. It was under. I did mine back in 2007. It was under 7 seconds. And it's now increased to 10 through the hard work Team Brit have done in terms of getting a race license easier for disabled people. So ultimately, that is the key health and safety thing to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Whereby, if your car's burning on fire, you've already proved that you can get out of the car and onto the floor beside the car to be dragged away by the marshals in under the 10-second limit, which they set you. But then outside of that as well, I always make sure that the chief marshal of the race weekend is aware that car number 68 has a disabled person in the car. So if anything does happen to them, then the marshals may need to give extra assistance.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Any other things that need to be considered. The other one is I'll just tell the clerk of the course, if I'm in a safe place, that we'll stay seatbelted up in the car.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm out of harm's way of another potential accident, obviously colliding with my car, that I'll just sit in the car and get a front row seat of the rest of the race.
Nothing wrong with that. I think it's one of the weird things that, like, I mean, I'm again going back to like road driving, but it's one of the weird things I always find with like smart motorways, the whole debate of staying in the car versus not being in the car. As a disabled driver, it feels like it's something that people haven't considered, but it's nice to know that it sounds as if the race meets that you've been to and competed at, they're quite supportive of it. Because the thing I worry about is like people are always quite fearful of the unknown. So it's nice to hear that when you go to race meets and stuff, they're very much like, oh, okay, cool. But was that always the way? Obviously, you've been in motorsport, disability motorsport for quite a while now. Was there a lot of teething problems when Team Brit started working with racers?
In my personal experience, no. It's always been an incredibly inclusive environment, and the nice thing is as well, people have always been open to accommodate any extra needs that I may have as a disabled person.
It's nice to know. I'd say that's nice to know because, as I say, whenever you are new, particularly as we've said at the beginning, where you're competing against able-bodied, it's not something that is automatically considered. Whereas if you're competing at a disability-focused event, well, no shit, Sherlock. They've all got disabilities. It's a disability event, whereas that's not the case when it comes to racing. So it's nice to hear, because I always think it's that you come up against the whole people not knowing what to do with you, so they're very hesitant. So it's nice to know that most of the race community is like, no, we'll figure it out. But then I think that comes from what you've just said of like the problem solving aspect of racing, of like, we've got this problem, how are we going to fix it? Whereas that's not always the approach taken in other sports.
No, it is nice to be involved in an inclusive sport, and kind of backtracking a little bit, but motorsport is the only sport that I know of that doesn't have a Paralympic class. Everybody races everybody, and using Team Brit's world leading hand controls, it means that we can go out there and beat the able-bodied drivers in the race, which is an incredibly empowering feeling as a disabled person.
Yep.
So,
would you like to see para sport bring racing into the Paralympics and things like that?
That's an interesting question. But based on what I've just said about there being no Paralympics in motorsport, like, does it need to be included in there?
Yeah, it's a good point. But it's one of those things like I suppose the only argument I would give for it being included is from a publicity standpoint. Because if you look at it from even myself, I've come from a swimming background, and the reason I got into para swimming was because I saw it at the Paralympics. I must admit, until I'd spoken to yourself, Chris, and obviously learnt about Nicholas Hamilton, kind of racing as a as a disabled person was kind of off the cards. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I say I would look at it from more the publicity side of things, but then again, all you need is someone to shout about it, and I think you guys are doing a great job at that anyway. So yeah, it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but it would be interesting. It'd be interesting. I think the only thing I would say is, would it open up the opportunities for disabled racers, because there would be more teams available, if that makes sense.
I think definitely in terms of raising publicity and raising the profile, it would have a huge impact. And that is one thing that is quite low in terms of disability participation in motorsport. It is still relatively low.
Yeah.
This year we've had, I think it's 8 drivers within Team Brit.
Wow. That's still quite impressive.
Outside of that, there's not many more that I know of. Unfortunately, motorsport is a very expensive thing, which may be the barrier, which probably is the barrier to participation for most. If you want something bad enough, then you'll go out there and find a means to do it, I think.
100%. Is there anything you think the racing community should do to sort of reduce the barrier to entry? Because it was something that I'd thought about before, of like, you often look at obviously I'm talking more the Formula One space. It's all very much, it's a millionaire's game more than anything else. What would you like to see motorsport do to kind of bring more people in and let them experience what it's like being in the sport?
In terms of racing at a basic level, simulators have become very accessible these days.
Yeah.
And they're not a huge outlay for them. And the number of different platforms out there that you can race on give a huge opportunity for people just to learn the basics of racing in terms of car control, lines, tracks, etc., etc. Without motorsport reducing the cost of everything, I'm not too sure of an easier or paving a way into motorsport more accessible. But that being said, racing goes down to Citroen C1s these days, and it doesn't get any cheaper than that. So it's just a case of looking. There will be a series to fit your budget somewhere. It's just a case of finding it, I believe.
The only caveat, the only bit I would add on as someone obviously outside of that world, is I would like to see more karting places becoming accessible, to kind of give people that flavour of driving, because it's something I'm gutted that I've missed out on. Of like, I would love to go on. The amount of times I've watched family members go on a go-kart track, and I'm like, I want to go out, particularly coming from a competitive family. I want to beat dad. Like that is the goal. And that's something I would like to see more brought into motorsport. And the other thing I would like to see them do, this isn't competitive motorsport, but the other thing I would like to see happen is more companies making racing experiences more accessible. And what I mean by that is, like, you can go on lots of websites now and take your favourite car around a track if you're an able-bodied driver. Yeah. You can't do that if you're a disabled. There are companies and organisations that will do it, but it's often not. You don't get the pick of like, oh, I really want to take this car around. Okay, I'll go take that one. And that's something I would really, really push and love to see. More so because one, I want to do it. Two, I think it'd be a great introduction into, like, then if they really enjoy it, they can look into something like working with you guys. And it's sort of a slow introduction of like, oh, I've tried it, don't like it, or I've tried it, loved it. And yeah, that's, I mean, I say that's not for Team Brit to take on. That's just something I've thought about, of bringing it more to the masses, of going, look, we offer this to able-bodied people. Why can't we offer it to disabled people? And I will caveat that with, I know there's a lot of complications with the adaptions they can offer, the different adaptions people use, but then if Team Brit can do it, why not?
Yeah, no, definitely. So basically what you've just said there is you'd like Supercar Days to be offered supercar driving experience just for you.
Yeah, basically. It's just, I mean, I'm happy to be the guinea pig. More than happy to be the guinea pig. But I still think it would be a great thing to, a great business. So I will leave that freely for any listener that wants to take that on board and run with it.
No, definitely. I would have loved to have found something like that, but before obviously I got into what I have done.
Yeah.
So yeah.
100. On that note of favourite cars and race days and everything else, what is your favourite car that you've raced with?
Oh, that's a tough one. So in 2020 and 21,
Yeah.
where Team Brit had an Aston Martin V8 Vantage.
Yeah.
And just the raw power you felt as you typically as you left the pit lane, it really pushed you back in your seat. Just the noise it made was something special as well. But that being said, the McLaren, which I race for Team Brit now, it's it's an easier car to drive. The Aston was very brutal and had a lot of brute force, whereas the McLaren is a bit easier to drive, has a bit more downforce, so it's quicker through the corners. And if I'm honest, I'm able to extract more of the performance from the McLaren than I was the Aston Martin. So very, very difficult question. Very difficult question.
They always are. And I'm going to follow that up with, if we move away from taking a car around a track, what is your dream car, favourite car, if you could pick your next daily driver?
Now you're really testing me. I think I'd go for a Mercedes AMG Black Edition.
Good choice. Mine's a bit left field, and I've said it to many friends, is give me a Chevy Camaro any day of the week. I don't know why. I've wanted one for a long time. That's the dream car. But then also I love the idea of one of those, or you don't see them often on the British roads. So just the sheer noise and head turning ability of it, I think, is the big draw for me.
Definitely. A friend of mine had a Chevrolet. No, it wasn't a Chevrolet. Was it Corvette Grand Sport?
Nice.
And I absolutely loved it for that reason as well, because it was rare. You don't see many of them around. So
yeah. And every time you ask someone, what car do you want if you won the lottery? It's always your Lamborghinis, your Aston Martins, your McLaren. Okay, I'll give you the McLaren, but yeah, it's always Aston Martins, Lamborghinis, or Ferraris. Those are where everyone goes to, or you'll get the soccer mums going, Range Rover Sport.
I'd have my AMG Black Edition, or I'd go for an Audi RS6.
Oh, good choice. That's up there with one of the ones I would pick, actually. I think thinking with my practical hat, an RS6 would be a very good, very good choice. Just give me an RS6 estate and I'd be well away.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have the estate too.
Oh, well, one day we'll get to them. I think it's one of those things where I sit there and go, it's just my brain can't switch off the practical side of it. I don't know about yourself, but I sit there and go, I'd love all these different cars, but I know I can't get a wheelchair in them. So I'm like, although I do know a guy on Instagram that's managed to get a wheelchair into a Corvette. So I'm like, if you can get a wheelchair into a Corvette, maybe. But then also I like space. That's my worst thing. My practical brain likes space. I drive an estate now. Don't know. I don't know what it is. Just my brain can't switch off but that's not realistic, is it? Which is probably not a great way to think.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, if it'd be great to have a Ferrari, but if you can't get your chair in it, what use is it? You just go for a little hack around your estate for half an hour, and then you'd be like, I can't do anything. And then with all the luggage, I need to take 2 races in terms of my suit, my gloves, my helmet, my boots, etc., etc. Yeah, having an estate, I've got an estate too. It just makes life so much easier.
Makes life so much easier, and also it just feels like you've got so much more space to work with. Even transporting other people around, failing not having an estate or an SUV, you can't really. Yeah, it's difficult. Difficult as a wheelchair user because you've got so much gear going on normally. Unfortunately, wheelchair users don't tend to travel lightly. I just wanted to come back to your racing career, and I wanted to ask, what has been your biggest highlight of your racing career?
my biggest highlight, we raced, Bobby and I raced in the British GT Championship in 2022. And our first visit to Spa in Belgium, we
Yep.
had an amazing race, and we managed to. So within British GT, there's GT3 and GT4 cars. We're racing in GT4, and within GT4, there's silver category and a Pro-Am category. So that's based on driver gradings. So the silvers have 2 silver graded drivers, and the Pro-Am have 1 amateur, which was myself, and 1 pro, which was Bobby. We managed to finish 3rd overall in the GT4 race out of all of the silver drivers and the Pro-Am crews. And we managed to win the GT4 Pro-Am category. And yeah, that was such for the first visit to the track. The weather was beautiful, and just what a team achievement. It was, unforgettable. And I'm so proud of what Bobby and I were able to achieve that day.
That's amazing. That's one of those pinch me moments. I can even just listen to it. I'm like, that's got to be up there. Do you have a favourite track?
My favourite track is Portimao in Portugal. I've not raced there, but we've been lucky enough to go there on a couple of pre-season tests, just to get some warm weather testing in, but obviously before the season.
Yeah.
Typically, here in England, temperatures get to mid-20s, don't they? So when we've been to Portugal in February time, the temperature in Portugal at that sort of time is in the 20s. So it replicates UK weather, but obviously much earlier in the year than we're able to here in England. So yeah, that's my favourite track. It's such a fast and flowing track. It's up and down. There's over 100 metres of climbing and falling each lap. So over 10 laps, that's a kilometre. And there's just some corners there, particularly the last one. You go into it and the track just completely drops away from you as you go around this right-hander. You go into it flat out. You don't break into it. It's flat out into it. It's just a lift on the throttle as you go over the crest of the hill, and you sort of sat there and see, where's the track? Where's the track? Where's the track? Just as you go over the crest, and you're like, there it is. And then back on the parry and down the start-finish straight. It's such an amazing feeling when you get it right.
Although my bottle would run out there. I think if I'm going, where's the track? Yeah, I think my panic stations might kick in.
Well, you know it's coming at one point. So
true.
You just got to trust your ability and the car's ability through there. It does take it, like as I mentioned before with motocross, it takes a bit of time to build up.
Yeah.
But once you're there and you get it right, it's such an incredible feeling.
I'd also wanted to ask, like, have you had any, coming back to like obviously we spoke about your highest moment, have you had any close calls with racing?
I've had more than close calls. I've had a few accidents over the years. I guess your question was sort of more aimed at lowest points in my driving career, and that was the most poignant one that sticks out in my head. So at Silverstone racing last year, things were going amazing. The team had pulled off 2 amazing pit stops up to the point in the race where we were, and the race strategy which we pulled off was working out fantastically. I literally just overtaken the car to move into the Pro-Am lead of the race and was catching the car in front as well. When I had a little spin at a high-speed section of the track, weirdly, I was in a gravel trap, and weirdly, I was able to drive out. Every other gravel trap I've ever gone in, I'd never been able to move out of, but this one I was actually able to get out of. I made my way to the edge of the track. I looked left and saw 3 cars come in, the last of which was a metallic green GT3 car. Now that went by, so I took that opportunity to sort of rejoin the track. Being honest, I didn't join the track quickly enough. I was a bit slow about it.
Yeah.
And got collected by one of the other cars who was racing their way around as well. There was a really big low moment for me, not for a number of reasons. The first of which obviously being the position and all the hard work that I'd ultimately thrown away.
Yeah.
Because that was it. Race was over. And the amazing position that we were in. then the thoughts go to obviously the damage to the car, working out how it was going to be repaired and how long it would take to be repaired. And finally, probably the bigger burden. So Team Brit, they're the only race team in the world made up of all drivers with a disability. But despite that, we're not a charity. We are a conventional race team supported by commercial sponsorship, not charity handouts.
Yeah.
So then the other big feeling of let down is obviously letting the sponsors down, and just the big feeling of having let everyone down ultimately. And that did take some time to recover from, if I'm honest. And then as well, added to that, there's obviously the concern. Fortunately enough, I was okay physically, but it was a big accident, a big hit. And obviously the outcome in terms of my physical health could have been so much worse.
Yeah. Do you, obviously the other thing, the other thing I suppose with that is always remembering that it's a team game at the end of the day. And I suppose the worst thing with racing is it's not, as you say, there's an additional cost because you got the damages if anything goes wrong. Whereas in most other sports, you don't have that. It's kind of, okay, we lost the game today. We'll just come back next week. So that I can imagine is quite a big thing. But then from what you've said about the race community, it's very much like, I would imagine a lot of your team, after everything calmed down, kind of went, look, it is what it is. On to the next one.
I'm not quite sure it was a case of on to the next one. It was obviously work. Well, we got a hell of a lot of work to do to rebuild this car.
Yeah, I mean more so with that question. I say with that question, more so with that comment. I more mean from the supportive team side of things rather than the physical. Okay, we need to fix the car.
Yeah. So no. Team Brit were fantastic around it. They all sort of rallied around me and provided me with the support which I needed.
Yeah.
And then going back to the next race, which I had there as well, they were incredibly supportive because getting back in the car after obviously an accident or a big accident like the one I had, my self-confidence was shot really. So they were incredibly supportive there in terms of helping me rebuild and do the work which I needed to be able to get me back to my best racing level.
I mean, I'd say I've obviously got the connection point of driving day to day, but even then I'm thinking back to when I've had car accidents, just driving about day, then it's the same effect. Obviously not the same effect, that's the wrong way to phrase it, but it's a similar effect of like you start doubting yourself and you go, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? You start overanalyzing everything you do. How long did it take you to get out of that and back to you feeling like, right, I'm back and I'm back to full speed?
It probably took about two or 3 months. So 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 more race meetings or practice sessions in the car. Now our races aren't every week; they are about once a month through the summer months. So our seasons start in late March, early April, all the way through to late September, early October.
So in
terms of getting me back to my best, it took around 3 or 4 race meetings / test days times in the car, which ended up being about 2, 3, maybe 4 months. So it was a long time.
It's a long time, and I imagine as well because you don't have the as you say, not every weekend. It's almost you like just waiting with anticipation of like, is it going to be a good race day? Is it going to be a bad one? Yeah, I can imagine that mentally must have been really challenging. Yeah,
it was very challenging. Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about the race season. We're coming now to the beginning of October as we record this. So what does, I don't know a better word for it, what does off-season look like for you guys?
So the off-season for us still remains just as busy, if not busier, than the race season. The main priority, as I mentioned before, we are a conventional race team funded by commercial sponsorship. So this time of the year, it's all about going out, renewing our existing sponsors and partners.
Yeah.
But also, there's common saying is that you can never have enough sponsorship. So it's always a case of going out there and trying to find new sponsors as well.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's also practicing on the sim, which I mentioned too.
Yeah.
Because that's when the weather is horrendous, like it is at the minute, is a way, you can still keep your racing eye sharp and your racecraft sharp by practicing on the simulator. And it's obviously not completely free, but the cost of driving on the simulator compared to a real car are considered massively less.
Yeah.
And finally, on that one, it's just a case of keeping up the physical fitness as well. The fitness that you need to be able to race the car for the stint lengths that we do, typically about an hour. It does take a lot out of your body. So it's all a case of just being in the gym, maintaining your physical level of fitness to be able to, so when the time comes next season to be back in the car, that you're already there. You don't have to work up to it.
You say it obviously with the going to the gym, and I'm going to ask a very naive question, so I'm going to preempt it with that. Obviously, a lot of people would go, why do you need to go to the gym to race a car? So I'm going to let you answer that question, because I obviously I have some understanding as to why that might be, but yeah, for your average Joe that's going, you're literally sitting down, because I guarantee you'll get that all the time. What is the impact of not keeping your fitness up?
The impact of not keeping your fitness up is obviously your performance in the car is then impacted in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
You need a high level of fitness to be able to deal with the G-forces that the car puts you under, to be able to deal with the extremely high temperatures which you can be subjected to when you're in there. The particular race that sticks out in my head was in September 2023, whereby the air temperature at Brands Hatch this weekend was in the mid-30s, and inside the car it was over 50 degrees.
Oh, Jesus.
Being able to obviously keep up your race pace in that was, it was horrible, being completely honest. But then finally, if your body is focusing all its energy on maintaining a high level of physical activity to be able to race, your mental capacity, it takes away from your mental capacity, which in motor racing is particularly important in terms of your lines, your braking points, your acceleration points. So by being physically fit, it means that your mental capacity is maximized as much as it can be to be able to focus on the key things which you need to do in the race.
I've never even thought about that connection. Obviously, if you're having to work harder physically, you're mentally taken away from it. That's that must be such a big impact, because, as I say, you turn off for 2 seconds in a race, and that's big problems. Yeah,
especially considering if in racing it's very small margins. So over a lap you might be 0.1 of a second faster than the car in front. So if you've lost 2 seconds because you're not physically fit enough, but you're only 0.1 of a second faster than the car in front, that could take you 20 laps to catch that gap back up. So being able to minimize your losses is vital.
Is there anything that you guys focus on from a fitness perspective? Is there like certain aspects of fitness that you need to focus on?
It's all round, really. You need a high level of cardiovascular fitness to be able to keep up and maintain the performance that you're doing. You need quite a high physical level of fitness, mainly in terms of getting in the car. So if in the pit stops, we need to be as fast as we can. So wheeling your chair up to the side of the car, getting in as quickly as you can. If it took you, a long time to get in, that would subtract away from the time which the mechanic needs to be able to strap you in, and then change the tires, etc., and do all the other bits and bobs they need to during the pit stop. So physical strength in terms of weight training is very important in terms of getting in the car and being able to maintain the key strength which you need in terms of turn in the car for a prolonged period of time. If you think about it, on the longest track we do, call it, there's 10 turns per lap, and call it a lap as a minute.
Yeah.
So over an hour stint, we're going to be doing 30 laps. There's 10 turns per lap, so that's 300 times which you need to turn the steering wheel. So you need to uphold that physical strength in terms of weight training to be able to turn the wheel that many times, because when you're going around corners at high speed, it does need a lot of physical effort to be able to turn the car.
Makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, it's one of those things that unless you're in it, you don't even think about. And you go, actually, yeah. And like even you said about the temperature thing, I'm like, temperature plus the amount of gear you guys wear as well. Whew, you must be like melting.
Yeah, it was very grim that day. I think that's probably the first time I've actually been glad to get out of the car.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. I would imagine it's like when you're on holiday and you go to get in a car and it's been in like 40-degree heat all day and it's just, yeah, that like can't breathe, but that just constant. Cool. Yeah, no, thank you. I'll leave that to you guys.
Ultimately, it's like going in the sauna fully clothed, isn't it? And sitting there for an hour, or trying to do some level of physical activity for an hour whilst you're clothed in a sauna.
Imagine that. Just saying to someone, right, go run around the sauna for an hour and let me know how you feel.
I don't think they'll be feeling great.
No, the amount of actually, I think Chris spoke about this as well when we had him on. Hydration wise, for you guys when racing, how does that work? Because if you're in that much heat and you're concentrating that hard, surely you guys have got to really monitor how hydrated you guys are.
I've never monitored it myself in terms of weight loss, but you often hear the Formula 1 drivers say at some of their extreme environments that they travel to that they can lose up to 5 kilos a race just through sweat and sweat loss, water weight. So, hydration is definitely something that we need to focus on as drivers.
And lastly, just before I ask you the last question, we've kind of touched on this at the beginning of the episode, but just to summarize, what advice would you give to a person with a disability that wants to get into racing? What advice would you give?
My advice to someone who wants to get into motor racing would just simply be to follow your dreams. If your dream is that big and that strong, you will find a way to be able to do it. The route into motorsport now typically is through simulators, as I mentioned, and so that is a perfect place to start. There are go-karting circuits out there which do offer hand controls.
Yeah.
So after you've practiced on your simulator for a while and you've got to what you feel is a competent level, maybe find a go-kart track that you can have a go on. They're sort of the entry routes in. Following that, maybe look to go to your local racetrack and find a series of races there that maybe is within your budget level.
Yeah,
whereby you could compete in it, and then I think following that's the point where you should sort of go for your motor racing license. So yeah, my overarching advice is simply just to follow your dreams, leverage all the contacts which you have and all the support which you're able to utilize to be able to get there, and good luck. Don't ever be put off by hardships. There will be hardships along the way. But yeah, just keep going.
And just because to give a bit more a bit more tangible starting point, one of the things you mentioned when you're saying the best way, the advice you give is about accessible go-karting tracks or go-karting tracks that offer hand controls. Can you name a couple? Because I think the only one I'm aware of is one in Glasgow. So I'm curious also for myself.
No. So Sandown Park, it has hand controls. Daytona, Milton Keynes has hand controls, and I believe Daytona and Tamworth Park will have hand controls too.
Amazing.
So you've got Sandown Park is Esher, Surrey way.
Yeah.
Milton Keynes is obviously on just off the M1.
Yep.
And then Tamworth is up near Manchester. I understand. I think.
Yeah,
Please don't quote me on my geography.
Tamworth is, you're correct. Now I'm questioning myself. It is definitely. I'll in the final edit, I'll put it on the screen so you can see it. And then lastly is the question that I ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
For me, it would just be, there seems to be a stigma about people asking questions and maybe offending people by classifying them in a certain way. I don't agree with that. I think people, just be open-minded, just ask a question. If someone doesn't want to ask it, answer it. They will say, I don't want to, I don't feel comfortable answering that even.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think it would just be the stigma around disability. Don't be afraid of a disabled person. They're just a normal human being. Treat them like one, really.
I 100% agree with that. It's very similar to my belief system of people only know what they know. And unfortunately, they're only going to learn if you tell them. And there's nothing wrong with, if you're not comfortable answering the question, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think there is something to, even if you can point them in a direction where they can start beginning to learn about your disability or a disability or what disability might look like. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
Definitely. I mean, I'm the chair of a business resource group at the company I work for, and we had an open panel, and one of the other leads, he said the other day when we were asked what our goals were, and it's the best answer I've ever heard. I think his answer was, my goal is for this group to no longer be needed or be here, because in that sense, we've now raised all of the issues and awareness that we need to, and people are aware of the issues that certain groups face.
Yeah.
And there's no impact caused by it anymore. So everybody is equal ultimately. So yeah, that was a phrase I
great
heard.
Answer.
It really resonated with me.
Yeah, great. So I mean, yeah, 100%. It's that whole thing of, that's what you call it. You said it earlier, an overarching goal. That is what you call an overarching goal. So 100% I'm behind that. But thank you so much for coming on, Aaron. It's been a great episode. And of course, if anyone wants to reach out to Aaron, I will link all of his social media, website and everything below. So if you want to check out his racing, maybe ask him a question, I will leave everything below for you. But thank you so much for coming on, Aaron.
Thank you very much for having me, Charlie. Thank you very much for having my social handles on there as well. Just a little bit more about Team Brit. Our overarching goal is to be the first team of all disabled drivers to compete on the infamous Le Mans 24-hour grid. We're chipping away with it bit by bit. And if any listeners out there are interested in supporting us on our journey or sponsoring me and or the team, I'd love to hear from you. So if you're able to share them details below, Charlie, I'd thoroughly appreciate that.
Yep, of course. No problem at all. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what you guys do is amazing. I thought that ever since I found out about you guys, so 100% behind you. And I have no doubt you guys will do it. You guys definitely will do it. But yeah, I will link everything below. And yeah, definitely, if you can help Aaron and the team, let us know. And yeah. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.